So that would be a complete flip from the old-fashioned business model where companies would look at forecasts a whole year in advance and then based on those unreliable forecasts produce a collection. Now they're actually going directly to those that would buy the garments, like analyze the data from these people and have a really good idea of who would buy, what to buy, and when they would buy.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Actionable ESG Talk series brought to you by AKFI Actionable Knowledge Foundational Institute, the world's first nonprofit industry consortium committed to bridging the gap between ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. My name is Isabella. I'm the co-host and here with Manuel, another co-host, and our today's special guest, Tracy. Hi, Tracy. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks to this talk series, we get to connect with all the great minds like you, like many others, to together discuss the current state and the future state of ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. Here, just going to be a quick overview about Tracy to our audience. Tracy is a technologist, driven by a purpose in sustainability and social impact in the fashion realm. She has spoken on webinars and panels from Fashion Revolution to the Hong Kong Productivity Council to educate and inspire change toward fashion's digital transformation. Her works have been featured in blogs and publications and many, many others. And Tracy also holds various roles. She currently holds two roles, the creative director at Lore, a bespoke Metaverse shopping experience, and strategist at Zapato, one of the biggest Metaverse platforms with over 3 million users globally. And she also oversees all fashion items for the North American market at a platform. And she was also the founder of the startup called Vor. And thank you so much for taking the time, Tracy. Very exciting to see how you connect the metaverse and sustainability and digital transformation all at once. It's a very exciting topic. I was just thinking about this sustainability green movement in every industry this past weekend because I see a lot of waste almost everywhere. So very exciting to hear what you have to share today. And how do you see the current trends of today's ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation in fashion industry?
For fashion, I have to say, even with a lot of the innovations going on within the industry, unfortunately, like I foresee it getting worse in terms of sustainability until it will get better later on. And the reason being is that, all the innovations are helping these companies to become more efficient, if the companies are still on track for mass production, for overproduction, it will only help them make that more efficient. But at the same time, consumer mindsets and some of the operating processes still remain the same traditionally. And I think, besides technology, a lot of things that needs to change is the regulatory environments, surrounding the material use, surrounding overproduction, surrounding pricing, as well as a consumer mindset. Although in the past few years, there has been a paradigm shift with consumer demanding more sustainability, but that's only a small portion when it comes to, when we're speaking on global terms.
Thank you very much, and also wanted to welcome you, Tracy. Thank you for joining us today. And I did some research, and I've been in the sustainability field for a couple of years, and I was totally surprised that I found that the fashion industry, when we measure in terms of greenhouse gases, carbon footprint, it reaches about 10% of annual total global emissions of greenhouse gases. This is huge.
Yep.
This is more than the car industry, is definitely more than the maritime shipping and international flights combined. So all this commerce going on, and we so focus on on ships and airplanes. And here we have it, in our stores, the fashion industry, and that cost us more in greenhouse gases emissions. So it's a surprise to me. And not only that, research showed that they'll grow very fast, and from 2019 to 2030, we'll have a growth of about 50% in short 4 years.
Mhm.
So, I'm coming into the question, but based on your experience, is technology, is Metaverse playing a role in what you see the current and the future role in this case?
Yeah, there's a lot of technology that can be applied to improve on the sustainability for the fashion industry. I can speak about the metaverse a little bit later because that would apply to only a small portion of it, right? From supply chain, actually, going even before that, from the sourcing of fibers, like to the supply chain all the way down to the end consumer. Um, a lot of things needs to happen. Technology in especially like right now in biotechnology can help with closing the loop, recycling of the textiles and actually reusing those fibers for new products. And then going to the supply chain, technology can help with processes, making the process more efficient, because as of this moment, the fashion industry is very siloed. There's a lot of outsourcing and then outsourcing and then outsourcing. Like you would have a design house, a design production house in New York, and then they would outsource to the manufacturers in, let's just say, China. And even when they're producing it, they don't produce everything all within one factories. And these factories would then outsource it to, let's just say, there are trim factories in Thailand, and there's like button factories in Vietnam. And of course, they still have to source the materials from fabric mills. Well, yeah, mostly in China, but like more and more is actually moving to other lower cost labor countries now. So with all these siloed parties involved in the supply chain, there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of, like not just sending samples back and forth, right? But also, like, and because a lot of these items are produced in places where their technology is decades behind us, there's a lot of waste, like dye and, things that countries aren't aware of, that it's actually polluting the waterways, like in those certain area. And of course, like we on here, like here in the US, we're lacking a lot of transparency to actually see those. And a lot of people are not aware. So that's one aspect of it. And then overproduction. Traditionally, fashion relies on forecast, and overproduction is a major problem because you would predict, companies would use the information from forecasting companies like WGSN, and they would try to predict the colors, the textile, or the fabric used, the patterns, so on and so forth for the next year's collection. Now, if you really think about it, that's like a whole year away. Like honestly, sometimes I don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow, right? So overproduction was never accurate. Although now technology, and this is where the metaverse comes in, as well as social media, would allow these companies to build their own communities, to have their own followings, and they could gather data from these communities, from their consumers, to have a much more accurate of what they want, and then using that for, like for the item assortment and the quantities that they were going to produce. So yeah, there's a lot of areas where technology can definitely help. And within going back, like going back to production, 3D is something that I'm very familiar with since my previous startup that I founded is a 3D virtual showroom to help fashion brands. And with the 3D technology now, on the pre-production side for these brands, they can effectively eliminate a lot of the back and forth sampling. And trust me, like that sampling stage is already a lot of back and forth. Sometimes it would take up to 12 samples to finally get to the right style, to get to the right fit. And especially for a design house that doesn't have their own manufacturing companies, that works with manufacturers in other countries, those samples are being sent back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Samples are being sent to buyers. And sometimes buyers would request the same sample in the same style in different colors, right? So 3D technology can definitely help with that in terms of fit, in terms of reducing sampling waste, and also helping with being better to predict the the consumer style and wants.
Very interesting. It sort of draws me to compare the industry with the movies industry, right? There's production of movies where they come up with samples, they try to figure out what the taste is, and you have long production lines. But the complexity of the supply chain and sort of the intertwine, the web of the supply chain, it's amazing. It looks like until we see something in a store, as you said, it's a long time and it's a lot of crisscrossing the world.
Yeah, definitely. And especially for the mass market, where companies are producing, anywhere from, I would say, 250,000 pieces, like and up, there's a lot involved, and things doesn't just get produced in one place. Materials, the processing of those materials come from pretty much anywhere.
Right, and it involves also agriculture, right? Well,
Yep.
agriculture or chemical industries. These are the two main sources of fiber, right?
Yep.
And both are subject to different pollution. The petrochemical industry, that's a main source of pollution as well. So, well, it's amazing. But I think you present some good news, even if the status quo is or the current status, not the status quo, the current status is so complex. It seems to be a target for actually deeper analysis of how we can move to reduce the carbon footprint, and the indicated technologies like 3D, which are cousins with metaverse, if I can say it this way, can lead to creating a better environment. First thing, a tighter fit to customer demands, a better understanding of the customers, also on the sustainability elements of their decision. Fast fashion comes into that discussion, and also comes the knowledge actually that we need to transfer to consumers about the impact, especially Gen Zers and Gen A, the next generation, the Alpha coming up. They are much more sensitive to the goals of sustainability, and they need to be aware of that. Very, very interesting. And I would like to sort of um, uh, we talked already how the technology can optimize the supply chain, and you had an example of how it also can help to first acknowledge and then create a circular economy, so we reduce the amount of waste. And before we started the chat today, you mentioned you being a desert full of unwanted and unwear clothes. people that never use them. Could you share the experience,
The Akatama desert
please?
in
Yes.
Chile, between Chile and between Portugal. I was actually just looking at the photos too. It's crazy because it's literally a dumping ground for fast fashion. And honestly, like the way that I feel is that right now in this world, everybody have too many clothing, like even me, I buy secondhand all the time. I buy um um pre-owned clothing. And a lot of times when I go to thrift stores, a lot of those clothing has tags on it, so it's still new. And then it just kind of got me thinking, right? Because even with the thrift, they don't always sell everything. So if they can't sell a lot of the items and then they have to make room for new items, or where do these items go, right? Like I did a little digging and they actually sell it in bulk in containers to to the southern, to the global south. And maybe some of these, like smaller, mom and pops, at the market would buy these clothing in bulk and then they will try to sell it in their local market. But a lot of times, like these clothing are damaged and that eventually ends up in a dumping ground, like in their countries instead. So yeah, that's the sad part.
Somehow, and I'll sort of divert the discussion for a second to the economics, but it sort of contradicts the basic economics because oversupply should lead actually to streamlining of the supply chain, right? Eventually, if there are too many companies producing, then eventually there should be consolidation and some companies will go under and so on. So the efficient economy theorem or theory doesn't seem to work in the case of the fashion industry. We think supply chains are efficient.
Yeah, unfortunately, with the fashion industry, it's the people that's working in it. When in my in my career, when I was in fashion traditionally, there are a lot of people who have been doing the same thing since 20, 30 years ago. And their mindset just cannot wrap around using these innovation for sustainability. And unfortunately, and to be, a lot of people actually doesn't care. So that's the sad part about it too. But yes, with the pandemic, there was actually a lot of consolidation, and I see the rise of smaller fashion brands who have the focus in sustainability. But I do want to mention, like as a consumer, do a little bit of research, and really make sure that they are about sustainability and it's not just greenwashing, right? A lot of companies are saying that they're sustainable, but when you actually look at what they're doing, look at some of the processes, and they're still being overproduced, they're not. They're using it as a marketing scheme, right? So do a little bit of digging. Um, yeah, making processes more efficient, like it would make sense for businesses. But at the same time, the silo of these, of the supply chain with, in the fashion industry, and these are not just silo along the supply chain, right? Sometimes within a company, there's a lot of silo. Like there's in a fashion, design production company, like you would have a full-on tech design team, which are the people that measures the garments, like write out the measurements and then send it to the factories to get a sample in those measurements. And then there's like the marketing team, the sales, and then the designers. Sometimes these people don't necessarily communicate the right way. Sales are not Selling items are not really based on real-time data. And I have seen sales or worked with sales, they only work with a few retailers, same person is really based on how they feel his or her buyer would buy. It's more, sometimes it's also based on that personal relationship between the sales and the buyers as well, like not necessarily based on data. So yeah.
So that maybe raises the question of influencers. Of course, we're all aware of the big Paris and Milan shows of glitzy,
Mhm.
trying to actually, I think, drive the taste of the people rather than follow, right?
Yeah.
And how this is reflecting to modern influencers, and it seems to me also the buyers have a bigger say than I thought. Of course, men fashion is a bit more conservative. It's easier to buy one piece of clothes and wear it for a long time, right?
Yeah,
Like a
the
jacket.
buyers definitely have a bigger say, but do keep in mind that's the older fashion business model. The good thing is that, the more innovative companies, the one who sees innovation, who sees the paradigm shifts in consumer behavior, are able to follow, like the current times. So back to your question on, like how the metaverse can actually help these fashion companies to be more sustainable, right? So last year, Forever 21 entered into Roblox and they released a collection on Roblox, and they gauged the response on Roblox to determine whether or not or how they go about um, producing physical garments based on the digital collection that they released on Roblox. So that would be a complete flip from the old-fashioned business model where companies would look at forecasts a whole year in advance and then based on those unreliable forecasts produce a collection. Now they're actually going directly to those that would buy the garments, like analyze the data from these people and have a really good idea of who would buy, what to buy, and when they would buy, and then they would release the collection based on those data. So that's one way that the fashion industry can utilize the metaverse. And on speaking for Sepetto, so Sepetto actually have a lot of the partnerships with fashion brands as well. There's Christian Louboutin. We have a consistent partnership with Zara, there's Tommy Hilfiger, there's a whole slew of other brands, but not just fashion brands. There's also a Samsung, like SoftBank. There's a whole lot of other brands too, and these brands have a community, has a following, in the metaverse, and they are listening to what these communities want, what these Gen Z wants. So that's a lot. That's much better data than forecasting.
Oh, that's actually very interesting, and if we can go a little bit more, can you sort of look forward in 5 years when the metaverse takes hold, right? Will become Web 3.0, metaverse, and all these new technologies will reach a mass market, will reach a consumer's market. And this is sort of a question for both because Isabella also is a futurist, so she's looking at the mind of tomorrow, the digital mind of tomorrow. How how this will evolve? Are we really going to address the issue of sustainability through technology evolution, or the industry is much more um, entrenched than we hope in changing and looking at sustainability as a main factor in their decisions to produce, to sell, to recycle.
Um, so honestly, no one will be quite sure of how it will evolve. But people are trying to get to a point where the metaverse would, like from the all of the platforms would become one metaverse, right? Interoperability is one of the major topics that's been within the metaverse community, and people are trying to achieve that. But as of this moment, the technology is not quite there yet. And once that happens, it will become a digital twin of this world where brands, and not just fashion brands, can utilize it to better connect with the audience. They can really utilize it to understand their audience without going through, jumping through hoops, like how things operated before. And possibly and hopefully reducing some of the silos within the fashion industry as well as some of the other industries, like if they have it. And yeah, I think possibilities are endless. It really depends on how people utilize it, how brands decide to utilize it. But as of this moment, I think one of the first use that brands are seeing, one of the first value that they're seeing is it's all marketing, being able to get in front of a younger audience and being able to really connect with them and build a community around the brand.
Very interesting point. And Isabella, unusual, but I'll also ask the question to my co-host and see how the digital mind of tomorrow, how the future looks to you. Again, I started this conversation by saying it was a total surprise of the carbon footprint of the fashion industry for me.
I'm not sure if I missed it. Tracy, did you talk about how your company and your experience have seen the 3D metaverse space has helped the fashion industry in details, meaning like what exactly it has done to reduce what kind of waste and to increase the efficiency of what kind of process? Did you mention that part or I missed it?
Not yet, but I can touch on it briefly.
Yeah, I guess that will give us some sense and hope on how things can be done differently in a better way, just to be more specific. Yeah.
Yeah. So my startup Vor, we were a virtual showroom solution utilizing gaming technology in 3D. Traditionally in fashion, a design team or designer would design, and then it would be a totally different person or a team that sends the measurements in numbers, right? You can't really visualize it. You send it in number to the factories to get the sample. With 3D technology, or like on the like within the back end of the fashion industry, they call it virtual sampling. Designers can design on the screen and at the same time fit it. There's a virtual avatar, everything is fitted in 3D. So they would see how the garment would fit while they're designing. And all of those measurements would be on the screen. If you adjust something, the measurement would adjust. Some of the best programs for it, I would say Browseware and Optitex is more for enterprise use, and Clo3D is more for individual designer use. I personally love Clo3D because of the quality in the visual quality of it. But yeah, so now you have that, and that's just one example, right? Now you have what was traditionally two processes, and maybe it requires two teams. One designer can do it. The designer can design and fit at the same time and just send those measurements to the factories and produce the sample. And most of the time, the sample, I would say it's 80% more accurate to fit than what was done before when measurements are just written in numbers, right? And send it to the factories because if you really think about it, a garment is really like a 3D sculpture that's wrapped around the body. Numbers doesn't really do us justice. So that's also one of the reasons why traditional fashion business, fashion model, production model has a lot of back and forth samplings, like anywhere from 12 plus. Yep. So that's one example of how 3D can help. 3D fitting, a lot of the overproduction is also based on fit, as well as people returning items because it doesn't fit them. 3D body scan and then fitting those garments to these individuals can reduce the return rate and also helping helping these consumers and customers to keep the items for a longer period of time. Now, of course, like when it comes to mass fashion, something that's more in the mid-range price point, that doesn't really fit in well with the business model. But if you're talking about something that's more bespoke, then it definitely would work with the with those type of customers.
Thank you.
And Isabella, in the space of the digital mind of tomorrow, that sounds to me that it's a process very similar to the digital twin. Some of the questions you're asking about how the metaverse, how the
Simulation.
yeah, exactly. Any any comments on this thread? No, no pun intended on
Right. I
how
guess
how
the
it fits.
challenge is to how to apply those to a massive market, meaning everyone can have the awareness to start using these kind of process to eliminate waste during the manufacturing, even before the manufacturing process. As Tracy mentioned, a majority of us are consuming probably the mid market price kind of product, and that's where the majority of the waste come from. I actually just donate a big stack of clothing this past weekend. Not to mention, you are from industry, the fashion industry. As a consumer myself, I can see the massive waste already. It's to the point that it's hard to ignore, at least to me. So I just think people's awareness is more critical than anything else. Maybe the younger generation will start to realize more. As you mentioned, the traditional generations are used to things it used to be. They're not even open to see what are the problems there. They're just focusing on what has been working for them. So things like those are very obvious to me and more critical than ever. Even as a consumer, it's really clear that we are wasting a lot of unsold and or old-fashioned clothing just on the market, dumped somewhere. So thank you very much for all these background and insider view to share with our audience today. And back to our topic, any other things we need to cover for sustainability,
Yeah.
ESG?
Let me think. So, and I think that, like Manuel and I, when we were talking, we had it came up before. All the innovation, like as good as it is, it's a tool, right? Like and any tool can be used for both good and bad. So with like with the process change, like AI and better, to better protect data within the fashion industry, I can say Shein, which is an ultra fast fashion, is definitely not using it for the good. They're capitalizing on the Gen Z's lack of dispensable income. So these Gen Z's just, just buying stuff that's cheap. And unfortunately, a lot of the consumers are still not aware of the impact of what they're doing, how unsustainable, like not just fashion, but also in a lot of the products that they're buying on a day-to-day basis. They're just not aware of it. And people will buy what they want to buy. People will buy if they feel that it's cheap enough, or if they just really, really, really like something, right? Even something that's just really cute. So with that said, there needs to be a conscious goal to use these technology to really make good use of it, and not just, like for, the averse of it. So that's one thing, I guess, that is worth mentioning. But within the fashion industry, there's and technology in industry, there's a lot of talk about how people are trying to use technology to be more sustainable, how consumer behavior should change more. But I think, like, and this is just how I think, right? Ultimately, if the government comes in and actually put the foot down and put regulations in place of, say, only use certain type of materials, right? Because blended fibers, like polycotton, it's really hard to recycle. It's almost impossible to recycle, although there are new technologies to recycle it, but there's also carbon footprints involved in recycling those blend fibers. Things like that, like I think what I'm trying to say is that, like if there are regulations for the fashion industry from material sourcing all the way down to production. I think that would definitely help a lot in terms of making the industry more sustainable.
So if I understand correctly, eventually the requirements of sustainability, recyclability, if the word exists, and circular economy will correct some of the problems. But I think part of the problems you said, and from a marketing viewpoint, this impulse buying, right? That a lot of the products are based on needs to be balanced by a disclosure on the carbon footprint, for instance. Yes, you buy this label, but if you don't use it, think twice. Don't buy it because there's the cost in carbon. This is the cost in. On the other hand, of course, there is a problem that we didn't address, and I hope we'll address in the next talk. But it's about the impact on the industry. The garment industry employs thousands and thousands of people in developing countries, developing economies, and this displacement also has to be addressed from a sustainability viewpoint, because we're talking also about the stakeholders in this industry. Yeah. But I'll turn it back to Isabella.
Thank you.
Are we over time?
No, we are not over time, but maybe we save another half of discussion for the future separate interview.
Yeah.
More information.
No, we're good. We're good with time, Tracy. Don't worry. We had longer interviews before. It's very customized depending on how the conversation goes. So thank you very much again. I think the photo you mentioned at the beginning on how tons of clothing are dumped on the ground might help raise some sort of awareness, at least visually, to trigger that kind of a sense of realization how we're wasting all those kind of materials into the nature. At least it worked for me. So that might be a good way to start some sort of action for people to aware what we're doing to the nature. So thank you very much again, Tracy, for everything you shared today. And okay, we'll insert this photo when we're editing this the video.
Yes, please.
Tracy, just share the link.
Yes.
For that visual effect of the fashion graveyard.
I know.
It's unfortunate because if you just Google Ekatama Desert and you see other areas of the desert, it's absolutely gorgeous, like it. And then there's the dump. Yeah.
Well, but there's the real world, right?
TJ Maxx.
Yep. Still with tags on.
Yeah, that's really shocking. Anyway, the conversation needs to come to the end at some point, and it's not the end. And we'll continue this discussion as things evolve. I'm sure Tracy has more to share with her work. Happy to have you back for another one to keep us posted on the progress. Thank you to our audience for tuning in. Make sure you join us every week for a new episode of AKFI's Actionable ESG Talk series, where you can gain new perspective on how to mitigate risk and create value by integrating ESG and digital transformation. Until the next one, bye for now. Thank you, Tracy. Bye, Manuel.
Thank you, Tracy. Bye, Isabella.